Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. On this episode, Eric Edmeades, international recognized speaker, film producer, business coach, and serial entrepreneur, chats with Nick about the entrepreneurial freedom Eric helps his clients gain through his Business Freedom and Wildfit program. Listen in to learn some of Eric's key principles and theories he teaches to living your best entrepreneurial life. Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, my good friend Eric, an internationally recognized business speaker, film producer, serial entrepreneur, just an overall badass and an awesome guy. Eric has varied business backgrounds, including mobile computing, medical simulation. I didn't know that actually. Augmented reality gaming, 3D camera engineering, and Hollywood special effects. He's the founder of Wildfit and the creator of both Inception Marketing and Business Freedom, a business ownership methodology that empowers you to own a business that doesn't own you. And we met at Joe Polish's Genius Network, actually, and have become friends. And I've been to your house in Dominican Republic and met your whole lovely family. So, absolutely, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
You know, I always learn so much from being around you and just enjoy the time that we spend. Do you mind to just quickly share with the audience what Wildfit and Business Freedom is?
Sure. You know, the short version is that many years ago, I had made this decision that I thought that I'd want to be a speaker or coach or, you know, somehow help people. And then it was really kind of funny because a friend of mine told me he was going to be a life coach, and I had never heard the term life coach at that stage. And so I asked him, what does a life coach do? Because in my mind, it was like, what, do you have somebody walking around you while you live your life with pom-poms going, go, Nick, go? Like, what is a life coach? And then he explained to me that it was going to be about helping people live better quality lives and all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't help it. My inner critic, knowing he's a good friend of mine, knowing him really well, I was like, how are you going to do that? Because he wasn't really living that way. And like, for example, I said, how specifically? And he says, well, you know, I'm going to help people really master their finances. And I thought in my head, I was like, are you going to do that before or after you repay the money you owe me? Like, you know, like what, you know, and then he told me he was going to help people master their health. And again, I'm thinking the dude had, like, I mean, he was carrying a few extra pounds. I'm not judging it. I'm not fat. I'm just saying, if you're going to stand up for something, you maybe should. He hadn't been able to see his own feet for a number of years. So listen, I know I sound awfully judgmental, but it was really, as always, what's going on is I saw the mirror, because here I was thinking I'm going to be this speaker, author, whatever. And I realized, okay, so maybe I was doing a little better than him in some of those areas, but I was not in a place where I felt like I realized that it would have been hypocritical. And so I started a business at that point and turned my life into an experiment. And over the next 2 years, I published a weekly magazine all about personal self and business development, reading a book every single week and studying it, basically getting my PhD, or as Chet Holmes called it, pig-headed determination, like really diving into this stuff and experimenting with it in my life. And when I finally sold out of the business and I'd kind of achieved all these things and had blown myself away with what I'd created. I mean, if I went back to the younger me and said, this is where you'd be living, and this is the kind of house you'd have, and this is the cars you'd be driving, and these are the people you'd know, and these are the experiences you had, the younger me would never have believed me. And so one day I got a phone call from Tony Robbins' team asking me if I would come and teach business and marketing at his seminars, and just as a fill-in speaker one time. And I did that, and it went really well. So he booked me for 1.5 years, and we traveled around the world teaching with him. And I just fell in love with it. I really, I got to a place where I sometimes feel like I have an overactive empathy. And I got to this place where it's like people would ask a question and I could feel their stress. And when I gave them the answer, I could feel the stress go down. And I liked that feeling a lot. And so we started teaching business seminars under the Business Freedom brand. And the idea being is so many people, I really believe that entrepreneurship is the ultimate expression of personal liberty and freedom when it's practiced correctly. But most people don't practice it correctly. And so we started teaching people how to do that. And in amongst all that, our clients were asking me how I can travel so excessively. I mean, very often I'd be on the road for 6, 8, 7. My wife traveled with me everywhere. And how could I land in a city, teach for 15 hours a day, 5 days in a row, have no jet lag, never get sick. Like, what's the story? And so I started sharing with them some of the principle that I discovered after turning my health around and the more I shared them, the more people wanted more. And so I created Wildfit as a way of servicing my business clients and helping them get more energy and helping them boost their immune systems, improve their sex drive, cognition, all that kind of stuff. And hence those two businesses, which started off as little hobby cottage businesses, just kind of ended up exploding on me.
Yeah. And just to talk about Wildfit, for example, and I'm aligned with you in there's a lot of self-help people and you look at them and it's like, well, how can you teach this when like it doesn't really look like you're taking your own advice here, or it's like, what actually qualifies you to be giving me advice? But there are certain people like you where it actually, it makes sense. And you're really talking to someone that lives and breathes and practices what they preach. Just in the few days that we spent together and just hearing how you speak about things like food is in a totally different way than you really hear other people talking about these things, right? It's not just, cut out sugar, cut out carbs, or something that seems trendy at the time, which may or may not have scientific evidence, but you really bring it back to kind of like primal. And it's like, well, what is the human, like, what did humans eat 2,000 years ago? From a genetic point of view, what do we need? Or relating it to nature, like I love what you say about avocados and some of these things about just like how like the impact of like pits and things like that and why that's the case and like how that impacts your digestion or when you should eat it. I mean, maybe you could just talk about that really quick, but I found that stuff to be just a totally interesting way of thinking about health and food.
I was lucky. I had an upbringing that kind of gave me some layered experiences or what have you. And, like many kids, I grew up with Rudyard Kipling and, how the leopard got his spots and all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of sometimes think of myself as the Rudyard Kipling in the health world. Like, why is it that we eat this way or why we do that? I don't want to pretend to be, at the forefront of that movement. The idea of origin-based diets, many would credit Lauren Cordain, who created the paleo diet, as kind of being the first person in that field. But actually, I spoke with Lauren a couple of months, or about a year and a half ago now, and asked him what prompted him to come up with the concept of paleo. And because he came up with it the same year as I wrote my original essay called The Human Diet. And so I was really curious, and it turned out that he'd read an article that it was published online. I think it had been written in 1984, 1995 by a guy named S. Boyd Eaton, who had been really, as far as I can tell, the first person to really theorize this idea of, wow, every species has a diet, including sapiens, and maybe we should be paying attention to our ancestry. And so, where I've been maybe a bit of more of a purist about some of that than in a traditional paleo sense is that I've had a long-standing interest in evolutionary biology. My great-grandfather was a famous zoologist that discovered one of the oldest Homo sapiens skulls in the history. Well, it was up until recently the oldest Homo sapiens skull in the history of Earth. 259,000 years old, right? You put that in perspective with the pyramids. That makes that makes the last presidential election and the building of the pyramids in the same time frame, basically. Like they're happening in the same moment compared to 300,000 years of human history. And so I grew up with that real fascination about that stuff. But I think what makes Wildfit truly different is not so much that stuff about origin-based diets. And we've introduced some really good principles around seasonality that, frankly, most people just don't even begin to understand. They don't understand how important it is that the body goes through particular nutritional cycles and so on. But the biggest thing that we've brought to the table, I think, is a novel approach to food psychology, which is why we have an 85 to 95% completion rate of our programs. Never has that been seen before, at least not in my experience in the diet industry. And that's where we've really that's why with no marketing, with no effort, it was truly a hobby business. I simply started doing it for clients and word of mouth exploded it. And that's why we've now helped thousands of people in over 20 countries around the world, simply because it works.
That it's really remarkable and also just logical too, right? So it's not that hard to really wrap your head around what you're saying or fight it because it's kind of just fighting logic. And talk a bit about business freedom, because I think that a lot of especially our listeners would be interested in what business freedom is.
Well, business freedom works on the basic principle that, as I said before, entrepreneurship practiced correctly is the ultimate form of personal liberty. Entrepreneurship is today's royalty. The issue was that royalty was always this inherited thing in the past. And of course, in our world, it no longer needs to be inherited. Of course, it still can be, but it can be created in a lifetime. That you could almost say by definition, that's the American dream to a large degree. The problem is for a lot of people, the American dream, whether they live it in America, Canada, Britain, it doesn't really matter. The concept of taking charge of your destiny financially, creating your own job, employing other people, all that kind of stuff. The trouble is for most people, it starts off as a dream and ends up as a nightmare. That's just unfortunately the reality. I mean, you'll know it fully well. I'm sure you've watched clients go through this, process of, I'm going to start a business, and then they make a number of tragic mistakes immediately. One of which they learned in school. They learned in school that collaboration, I mean, think about it. If you were given a homework assignment and you worked with another student on that assignment, it was called cheating. And so for 12 years, we were conditioned that 90% of what we should be doing on our own. And the only time that we should collaborate with another student is when we were told to. And then when we do that, we should even then vie for credit for who did what and who did how much, right? So we were taught this deeply individualistic, kind of independent thing.
Oh, that's super interesting. That's so right.
Yeah. And so, and we have to remember that we make up our rules for life when we were 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years old. So your rules for life are largely governed and created when you're in school. Here's a rule for life. If you get help, you cheated. If you get help, you don't get full credit for results. And so most people start a business and refuse to ask for help. And so as a consequence of that, what in America and in Britain, and I believe the statistic holds in Canada as well, and it probably holds through most of the Western world, 4 out of 5 businesses will fail before their 5th anniversary. So, you have to think of that, who does that? Who's willing to make an investment where the odds of survival are only 20%, never mind return on investment, right? So first thing is you have to get is that most entrepreneurs are hopeless optimists because they're going into a field that has an 80% failure rate. And then what's really shocking is that the 20% that survive, well, frankly, they don't survive. They get by. They work harder than any employee anywhere. They stress themselves out. They don't sleep. They sacrifice time with their family. Their health goes to crap. And they aren't generally even paying themselves enough for the sacrifice they're making, if there isn't enough for that. And so what business freedom is about is those few shining examples where the entrepreneur starts a business and gains personal and financial liberty and freedom as a result of the business, and therefore massively improves their quality of life, improves their ability to live the way they want to live, spend time with their family, and have the money that they really want to have to live like royalty. That is the opportunity, and business freedom is about that small percentage of people.
Yeah, easier said than done. I mean, it's a jungle out there. It's not easy, and there's a million ways to go down a wrong path, right? And if you have someone—
It is, but even that expression, it's a jungle out there. You're saying it to the right guy. I've spent some time in jungles. If you even take a look at this picture, I don't know if you can see it real closely. That's me on a horse, and that is a white rhino. That is not the safest way to see a white rhino, I can tell you right now. Yeah. And worse than that, I've even been closer to white rhinos with my cameras as a photographer on foot, never mind in a 4x4. Now, so when you say it's a jungle out there, what I would say to you is that a jungle is only a jungle out there if you don't understand the rules of the jungle.
Exactly.
And so, you don't go into the jungle without a guide. You just don't. I don't go. This trip here, I had a guide with me. When I've gone to stay with the Hadza Bushmen, I have my guide and the Bushman is my guide.
Right. You have to be prepared, like at vaccinations, you have to have a guide with you. You're not just going to go and just run into the Amazon and just try to survive by yourself.
And yet people go into the entrepreneur jungle all the time that way.
And it's the same thing, right? There's a million things that can go wrong, and you need to be prepared and also have the support and guidance. I'm constantly, we're both part of a handful of things like Genius Network and things like that. There's just so much, aside from all the great content that you have in Business Freedom, I would imagine that a lot of people also get value just from the network and being able to ask each other questions aside from just
Yeah.
all the content that you provide. Like, I find it really helpful just being an entrepreneur, having support networks just to even like vent to, like, like, hey, I had a shit day today. Like this happened. And just because it's really hard. Like my girlfriend, she doesn't understand what it's like. Right. And like, only someone that's in it, like, can understand. And like, you really feel you can talk to.
It's like parenting. It's the same thing. Look, there are people with kids. There are people without kids. People without kids have no idea. They don't even have, like, they go, I'm thinking of having kids, so we thought we'd get a puppy first to see. What? Like, it's not even close to the same thing. It's not, but it's the same with business. People who have never started a business, who've never had a bunch of people's mortgage payments dependent upon their results, their results. If people haven't had that experience, they don't know what it means. And it's really fascinating. I was doing a talk one day and I was talking about the loneliness of entrepreneurship. I was saying, look, entrepreneurship can be a deeply lonely thing. And my wife afterwards, she goes, Eric, in your business, you had 35, 40 employees, countless suppliers, hundreds of customers. How could you ever have been lonely? And I go, oh, it's not really that I was lonely. It's that I was alone. Mm-hmm. Because you can have all those people, you can, but try mentioning to them you're worried about payroll coming up, right? Like then you'll be alone and lonely, right? So having that network, like Genius Network is an outstanding environment for that, because everybody in there is trying to do big things and has their businesses. And we do very much, we do similar stuff around business freedom, where, what's really useful. It's like, in Genius, when Joe's talking about like things that are half an elf, and he's creating language that labels something so that you can manage it more effectively. And now when you've got a network around you that uses that same language, it's a lot easier to talk through your challenges and create solutions. And so our clients, they know things like business icebergs. This is a very important part of the process that we do. They know what a roll map is. They know what mini exits are. And so, that means you're so right that when they get together and they go, look, I'm having a crap day today. Why? Oh, because I've run into an iceberg and I've got this going on and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, having that network is massively important.
So what's a mini exit?
A mini exit, it's one of the really underpinning powerful aspects of business freedom. And it's so simple. Most people have a job. They start off with a job, and one day they figure their boss is a jerk and they quit their job thinking they can do better as a business owner. I'm oversimplifying, but this happens. Yeah. And they quit one job. They were the sales director, right? And they quit their job. And then they start a company. And at first they have tremendous feelings of freedom. I've quit my job. You can take your job and shove it, right? They're all like, yes, I have freedom. Look, my business card says owner right on it. Like huge amounts of freedom. And then somebody has to take out the garbage, and it's them. And then somebody has to design the marketing, and it's them. And then somebody has to do the bookkeeping, and it's them. And somebody has to cut a purchase order, and it's them. And in the meantime, they're going, when am I ever going to have a chance to sell anything? Because I'm supposed to be the salesperson, but I'm doing all the stuff. And what they need to do is serve notice upon themselves. Dear Eric, henceforth and forever on, I provide my notice that I am quitting the job of bookkeeper. You have 6 months to solve that problem. And so mini exits are the role-based exits that an entrepreneur needs to make to move to the final exit. Because, I saw this business guru once, and he was saying about exit strategies. And he's like, everybody says you need to have an exit strategy. And he goes, you don't need to have an exit strategy. How would you feel about getting on a plane if the pilot had an exit strategy? That's a funny joke, but I had to walk up to him afterward and say, I'm not getting on that plane if the pilot doesn't have an exit strategy. And so in business these days, here's a fundamental truth. It does not matter what the exit strategy is: selling, licensing, IPO, handing it off to family, a joint venture partnership. It doesn't matter what the exit strategy is. If you have not made all the mini exits that have to be made inside the business, no exit strategy will work.
No, I love the concept. I think that the whole concept of exit strategy is spoken about so much because it's sexy to talk about raising venture capital. And I think that that's like one of the biggest like misconceptions that that's going around about entrepreneurs. Oh, I just raised 5 million. I just raised 10 million. He just did a series A or B. And people just think like that's what you need to do. So I think that that's influenced some of this conversation around exit strategy. One of the things I pride myself with is that I was able to bootstrap leverage. In 3.5 years, we never raised money. We did 7 figures the first year because not having raised money forced us to be clever and smart with our resources and cut corners or hack together certain things and not raise a few $1 million and blow it on
basically have a bunch of employers.
Yeah, and then have bosses. Because if I were to do that, I would be talking exit strategy. Now I'm just trying to create something of value, and if I want to sell at some point, fine. But if not, it's not that bad either to just have a profitable company and have the freedom mixed with this new concept that I have now called mini exits, and to kind of sit back.
Hey, listen, Nick, your company is like one of the ideal ways for people to create mini exits in their business. You should buy the URL miniexits.com if you don't know. That's a great. But we've been talking for a long time about doing something together. Maybe this is a good angle for us. We've talked about some of the efficiency stuff that I am geeking out on, how to integrate that with business freedom. But yeah, I really like this concept of mini exit. I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and maybe it's just because I have so much on my mind, but I'm like, do I have Alzheimer's right now? And obviously I don't. But then it starts getting me to think, I should operate the business as if I did have Alzheimer's, meaning I should have things so well documented and placed in certain places where literally I wouldn't have to remember anything except for maybe a handful of basic principles. Oh, this is a finance thing. I know for that the information lies here, or it's automated, so that literally if tomorrow I were to wake up with Alzheimer's, the business would still be running. And that's something that you're totally right. I just don't like the metaphor. And it's just a vibration. My version goes like this. And it's actually, there's a little upgrade in it. You shouldn't even need to know those principles. It should work like this. I call you, Nick. I'm going on an amazing world cruise. I've got some unbelievable people that are coming. You know what? We're going to get Mike Koenigs to come along. We're going to get Yannick. So we're going to get some really cool buddies to come with us. You got to leave on Friday, and we're going to have no Wi-Fi. Will your business continue to operate and grow as though you're there? That's the end result of business freedom. And so you're right. The one way to think of it is that if I was not going to be here, the business needs to know what to do.
I guess yours is a slightly more positive spin. The other metaphor is the get hit by a bus tomorrow example.
Yeah, there you go. But I think it's important. And we talk about there being 2 types of business freedom. There's business freedom, for people with passion-based businesses. So, somebody who's like a dentist, a doctor, a life coach, a lawyer, that their business is practice-based and their practice is their passion. So in other words, let's say a dentist, and I'll never understand how somebody could enjoy that job, but I'm grateful that there are people who do, right? And so, but the issue is that what will happen to many of them is they finish dentistry school and then they open up their clinic and they find that they're doing a bunch of administrative work and they're hiring and they're doing ordering. And so what's happening is that they're only spending, say, 20 or 30 hours of the week doing what they want. Or if they are spending 40 hours of the week doing what they want, they're working overtime effectively to do all the administrative stuff that allows them. And so type 1 business freedom or level 1, if you want, is where you are at the point, and this is so your company, this is so what you do for people, where you're at the point where 99% of your day is your passion. Where if you're a dentist, you show up, you walk in, the client is there, you fix their teeth, you send them on their way feeling good about yourself, and the next client comes in. And that's the first level of it. Then the next level of it is that you don't even have to do that anymore. That there's enough other dentists and there's enough other people in the clinic that if you just didn't want to work, it would make no difference. And some people go, well, but Eric, it's my passion. Why would I ever want to stop? Let's be clear. I have watched people move in and out of passions in their lifetime. And also, what happens if something happens to your family and you need to take 3 months off? Like, Nick, I remember you remember those kids that got trapped in the cave in Thailand? My first thought about that, really honestly, when they started saying that those kids might end up trapped in the cave for 4 months because the water levels were coming up, my first thought was, I would go. If it was my kids, I would go to Thailand. I'd put the diving, I'm a diver. I would put my diving equipment on and I would go into the cave and I would sit there for 4 months with my kid. I would never be able to, how would you be able to have a single meal? How would you be able to watch a movie? How would you be able to walk on the beach? How would you be able to get any work done if your kid was in that cave? And no way, I'd have to go. And you know what? I could. Because at that level of business freedom, you're able to.
Totally. And
incidentally, while you and I have been on this call thinking of asking for help, we just registered miniexits.com.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's a good one, isn't it?
I just got the confirmation we got it.
I mean, you're going to have a couple probably a month or two till this releases anyways, a head start, but glad that you got it before the end of this. Yeah, one of the things that is really core to what we even say to our clients that sign up at Leverage is we really want people, our mission is to have people focus on what they get joy from or what's in their unique ability, right? And if I'm not a good writer, right? My background, I'm a mathematician. So I like solving problems. I like doing stuff with tech. I don't like writing. So I'm a writer for ink. I outsource all my ink articles. I just don't get joy from it. I'll put my writer, I'll either audio record in a cab the content and send it to him to clean up and write. Or I've been even lazier lately and I'll just do an email intro to my ghostwriter and someone to interview and tell them to come up with the content themselves and just post whatever they feel like. I don't even check it anymore. Because it's not something I get joy from and it's not something I'm relatively best at. Another thing too, in the consulting that I've done, I've noticed this. I wonder if I'm sure you have too. I've noticed, there's common patterns that I find in businesses that I do the efficiency consulting with. But one of the things that across all of them, none of them do is document knowledge and processes, which is core. You can't be replaceable or you can't go to that cave for 4 months if you don't have stuff documented. Yeah. And no one does it. Like when my ex-business partner gave me 5 minutes notice and just quit, the company literally would have gone bankrupt had I not have been documenting processes. Like you have to, one, it de-risks your company because those things happen. It's one day, God forbid, you will get a call, you'll need to go away for a month to a cave or whatever. Your business partner could quit. A number of things can happen. So it scares me that people aren't taking that more seriously and documenting processes and knowledge. So another benefit of it too, though, is you'll save money because then if it's documented, you don't have to pay people to waste time explaining it. They can just go and retrieve the information.
The training cycle is so much better.
Yeah. It's crazy. When I was a high frequency trader, I used to be forced to take a 2-week vacant block leave, that's called, every year to make sure I wasn't hiding trades. That's the logic behind it. So before I would go, I would have to document how to trade my book, how my algorithms worked, etc. And every time I came back, there was always an improvement to the process, right? Sometimes big, sometimes small. For me, a win, even if I can save 5 seconds, I consider it a win, right? Because if you celebrate those small wins and you're just focused on that, after a couple hundred or 1,000, it starts accumulating. So I always tell people lower the bar. But every single year for 8 years, there was always an improvement. And that's also because another benefit of this documentation is fresh eyes spark innovation, right? Even if you're the world expert at something, if you're doing it day in and day out, even someone less experienced in that particular field will have fresh ideas that you did not think about, guaranteed. And so what I do at Leverage is we do quarterly rotations now. We've documented all of our processes, and now the person that does payroll does operations, the person that does client success does tasks, and it de-risks the company so I don't have specific risks on one person knowing payroll. But it's also basically helped us to define and figure out collectively what is the optimal way that we should be running various departments.
It's one of the core principles of business freedom as well. And, there's another distinction on this. Not only do fresh eyes spark innovation, but your mind will spark innovation when you step out. Mm-hmm. There's the old cliched example of the two woodcutters. You might know it. The two woodcutters are competing for a job and they're given an equal sized pile of wood. And, the one cutter's cutting real hard. You know the one, right? And at the end, there's the guy who kept leaving. And the other guy said, how did you win? How did you get through? You kept taking breaks. And he says, I wasn't taking breaks. I was sharpening my saw. And you know, the one thing that I like to add to that story is you can't sharpen a saw while you're using it. You just can't. And so the way I think of that is that when you take these breaks away, not only does the new person in that position bring innovation, but you, once you disengage, pop, pop, pop. I mean, I often do this. I'll have an audience, a couple thousand people in the audience, and I'll say, how many of you have had your best ideas driving mindlessly down a country road or standing in the shower, right? Like when you're removed from the circumstance, the stuff can fly. And proceduralization, funny enough, allows for those gaps. You know, Nick, when I started my first company, 1997, I started an IT company in the United Kingdom selling wireless networking, mobile computing, barcode scanning, and that kind of stuff. And our clients were retail companies and logistics companies, airlines, and so forth. And I started that business, and I kid you not, the first purchase order came in from a client, and my first thought was, if I were a huge company, how would I respond to this? And I thought, well, I would send an order confirmation. I thought, but if I was a huge company, what would that order confirmation look like? I said, it would look templatized. It would have boxes. It would look amazing. So I went to my word processor and I created a template of a word processed, like beautiful template, like you would, like filling out a FedEx shipping form, that kind of a real official looking thing. And then I realized one of the things it would have is an order confirmation number and all this stuff. And so what did I do? I sent them off that thing, and then I saved that document in a folder called Master Templates. And that was day one of my business. And that, I always tell people, that business is why I had a 7-figure exit.
That's funny you say that. I mean, I started this new this new consulting, business efficiency consulting business. And one of the first clients I had, it was going to be for a very large contract. And I wanted to make it look like I was really official and been doing this for a while. So I had a designer design me a logo for the business because I was like, all right, a business needs a logo. And then I even had him design the layout of the contract so it looked as official as possible. I probably paid about $2,500 between people to edit it, people to design it, format it so it looked as professional as possible. But now I have it as a template. So now I just use this super professional looking contract every time I do a deal.
Absolutely right. You know, and there's a chain, Spar. They're a chain of a retail chain of grocery stores and stuff. And they were a longstanding client of mine. And one day I was personally on the phone with two of the guys from the logistics department. And they said, Eric, maybe you could settle a bet for us. And I said, sure. And they said, how big is your company? And I said, what? You guys have a bet about how big my company is? And they go, yeah, you know, I mean, how big is it? And at this point, we were in about the 4th year or so. So, you know, maybe we had 12-ish employees or, you know, thereabouts. And actually, I think it was more like 8. And we had one location. You know, years later, things would be different, but that's where we were. And they're like, well, how big is your company? And I went, well, you know how it is. If you've got 8 employees, you maybe have 12. You know, like, maybe we have 12 people here. And so the one guy goes, do you mean 12 people at that location? And I went, yes, 12 people at this location. And they said, and how many locations do you have? And I said, 1. And they both busted out laughing, huge gut laugh, right? And then it turns out what's going on is that they were remarking on how when they got a shipment from us, the packing lists were so pro, the packing inside was so pro, the packaging was so pro, the quality was so pro, that we were clearly a multinational. The other guy said, no, I've been doing business with Eric, and I swear he was in his living room. I think he was running the business out of his garage just from the early days. So no way. And that's why they had a bet.
That's awesome. Another thing too is nowadays you can automate so much. So aside from documenting processes, there's a tool, literally this tool, Zapier.com. This tool really helped me to avoid probably having to hire 20 full-time employees. Like the amount of automation that this tool does, it's one of the core things that helped me to avoid raising money is by the mere fact like that I just automated all the menial tasks that normally you would pay someone for.
Yeah. Yeah, we are living. I kind of do feel like we're living at a peak technological existence at the moment. I'm a bit of a pessimist. I think it's about to go downhill pretty seriously. That's another conversation. I feel like as entertainment becomes ever more realistic, human productivity is going. Ready Player One, the movie, not far off what the truth is going to be. I think.
You mean because like there's just gonna be so many like distractions that you're just gonna get.
Yeah, if you think about it. Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, all we're here to do is produce chemical responses in our body. Everything we do is designed to produce chemical responses in our body. We want to release serotonin over here and a little dopamine over there and try to avoid releasing cortisol over here. But then again, we'd like a little adrenaline from time to time. I mean, that's what we are, little chemical computers. And now Netflix allows us to, to produce a lot of those chemicals without getting out of our couch. And if you consider, I think I saw India the other day has a campaign together right now on a national level to help people break Netflix addiction because they're losing productivity at such an incredible rate. Well, now let's consider this. Pong to Pac-Man to asteroids to where we are now. We are in this unbelievably steep realism curve in video games. We can't be 10 years away from video games being indecipherable from life, which means you could go skiing in the Alps in your living room. Tell me anybody's going to get anything done after that.
Yeah. No, it's funny. It's really funny that you're mentioning this. This morning I went to a meditation event thing, and one of the people there was what was it called? She was a consultant in phone addiction. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that type of role. And I was like, wow, it makes sense. Like, it's definitely needed. I just never heard of it. One thing that I found, I don't know if you do this, but on my phone, what I've been doing lately is, and I'll show you because we're looking, you can go to the display settings and turn off the colors, and it's a triple click on the home screen. And I find that if you turn off the colors on your phone, it makes it way less distracting.
Way less addictive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that talk that I did this talk that got me a little bit of popularity here and there on a concept I'm writing about called the hindsight window. And it's basically a system for managing the way you deal with bad events. It's a conversation for maybe another day or another podcast. It's kind of fun. But one of the bad events that I talk about in that talk, which you can find on YouTube, but what happens is my wife and I come back from 6 months on a road and almost everything we own was stolen. Like almost everything, passports, material possessions, money, everything was gone. And that's an interesting story about how I processed that. No kidding. Within 10 minutes of it, I was done. I was fine. Not angry, nothing. Like 10 minutes in, I was actually grateful that it happened. It's a funny process. But the one thing that happened is that my cell phone went and I made the decision not to replace it. And so I lived for 6.5 months without a mobile phone of any kind. Wow. And it was mind-blowing. Wow. I suddenly felt like I was on a planet full of aliens. Everywhere I went, all I could see was people walking along on their phones. And I suddenly realized that was me before my phone was stolen. And it really gave me perspective. And the only reason I ended up replacing my phone in the end is that my wife got pregnant. And I felt like now out of a sense of urgency, I need to have a phone. But that has given me a level of awareness of how addictive the phones are because I broke my addiction.
I mean, you could also get like a second phone, right? And like have like a flip phone or like no apps or anything on it. And it's just like an emergency phone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
the challenge that we have now, addictions are fascinating. I think of, addictions as falling into two categories. There are, chemically, physically addictive things like cocaine or, crystal meth. And then there are emotionally addictive things like video games and cell phones. The reality is they're all chemical addictions because what's going on is the cell phone is triggering a chemical response in the body. And so, where the toughest addictions to break are the ones that are attached to a required human function. So if somebody has an alcohol addiction, at the end of the day, they could just stop drinking. That's a choice they have. And many of them do. And then that phase of their addiction is resolved. Now, same with cocaine or heroin or whatever the case might be. But when you start moving into like people who have food addictions, that's a problem because kind of giving up food, not such a good idea. And now the phone has moved into that category where it's practically not possible for most people to live without a phone. I mean, I travel so much, I couldn't live without Uber. Actually, Lyft really is my preference, but I couldn't live without Uber or Lyft these days. And so my phone has now become this I always think of food addiction, sex addiction. These are things that I don't think you want to give up cold turkey. And now, after my 6.5 months without a phone, I was able to really see where my quality of life was being enhanced by the phone and where my quality of life was being detracted by the phone.
That's super interesting. I want to be respectful of your time. So where can people find out more about all the stuff that you're working on?
Well, my primary website is www.eric.ee. And of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I actually manage my own Instagram. So if you write to me there, you're hearing back from me for the time being.
Eric with a C. E-R-I.
Eric with a C. That's right. Yeah. Thank you. So Facebook, Instagram, and www.ericwithac.ee. That's me.
All right. Awesome. We'll have to do another one of these again, like maybe a workshop together and just riff on some of the stuff that we geek out on.
I'd love to. It'd be super fun. I'm really, you and I have talked about this on a personal level, but I know for anybody here listening, really, truly, we have helped entrepreneurs all over the world. Our clients are in 20 countries around the world, and we've helped them all over the world use some very core principles to create real personal liberty and freedom. And I will tell you that my feeling is that what Nick does and what you do, Nick, is you are potentially one of the most powerful tools in an entrepreneur's quest for personal freedom in a dozen different ways. So we'll definitely do some more stuff.
I appreciate it. And I really respect all the stuff that you're doing. And it's just screaming for a collaboration here. So thank you for being on the show, and we'll do another thing very soon.
Sounds good.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small businesses and entrepreneurs scale their business. Scale your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more, visit getleverage.com.